So tell us about what the SCHS sets out to do.
Yeah, so our mission is, I would say, educational. But we really want to reach everyone in our community and beyond with a little bit of Schenectady history and the culture of that as well.
And what do you think is the Society's most striking feature? Because I understand there are historical societies located not just in other parts of New York, but all over the United States. What do you think sets the SCHS apart?
We have very talented staff and volunteers who are good at taking things outside of our museums and bringing them kind of into the streets and even into the river in some cases, and turning
the Mohawk River.
The Mohawk River, exactly.
Okay.
And kind of turning the whole community, the whole city, the whole county into a sort of living museum.
This is really compelling. What's a good example of how you see the whole county really as a living museum?
Just the most recently, I guess, would be over the summer we did a lot of kayak paddles on the Mohawk, which is a different way to kind of experience the history of the region. But even a couple years ago, we had a really great program where we brought people out onto a few farms located in rural parts of Schenectady County to kind of tie in the agricultural history of our region with contemporary farmers and what they're doing, so people could experience a little bit of both.
I want to come back to historic sites and historic farms in particular in just a minute. But this is really interesting because I know you've been a curator at the SCHS since 2014, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So you have all this incredible knowledge about the collections, the sites. Do you have any favorite objects that's held at the Society?
Absolutely. I am a huge nerd when it comes to old furniture, but specifically furniture that's kind of more folky. Not fancy furniture, just things that were made locally and used locally and somehow have like stood the test of time, and we're able to still have them in our collection.
That's amazing. How old are some of these pieces?
Oh gosh, we have furniture from the early 1700s.
Oh, wow.
Easily, yes.
Yeah, so this is, I mean, it's kind of like the dates that one would associate with like the first settlements of, you know, people of European descent in this region.
Absolutely.
That's pretty incredible. Kind of curious, what do you think that audiences would learn about Schenectady's history that you think that they would find surprising in some way or another?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. One of my favorite kind of anecdotes is the historic center of Schenectady is the Stockade neighborhood, which is still there today. But what people don't know is when that original neighborhood had a stockade wall around it, there were actually longhouses inside the walls that people from the Mohawk tribe were living in.
Right, because isn't that a very distinctive part of like Mohawk architecture and even part of the wider Iroquois nation?
Yes.
Is these longhouses,
and
right?
I don't think people really think, you know, next to kind of colonial style dwellings that there would be a longhouse right there, but we have early maps and drawings that indicate that that was in fact the case. So I think that speaks to the ethos of Schenectady at that time. Definitely a more perhaps open society, more accepting than other regions.
So what inspired you to get so interested in showcasing Schenectady County's history to the public?
I think it's stories like that, just so many stories of people working together. Also, it hits so many key notes in American history. I mean, you have some of everything here. You have this very early frontier colonial trade period. You have the Industrial Revolution was huge in Schenectady. There's no shortage of stories to kind of dive into, which makes it really easy to get people excited about history. No matter what they're interested in, I can kind of find an angle.
Right, right. And you're from further downstate, is that correct?
Yes, I am. I'm from Westchester County originally.
Yeah, but close enough, right, to see the kind of play out of these different phases and stages in New York's wider history, for sure.
I think definitely Eastern New York shares a lot of the same history, for sure.
So let's come back to these historic sites that the Society oversees. There's a historic house, is that right?
Yes.
As well as, what are the two other sites that you
have? We have a historic farmhouse, and then in the city we have the oldest house in the city, which is an artist studio right now, and we also operate a museum and library just down the street from that.
That's really cool. I want to sit for a minute with the farm. This is the Maybe Farm.
Maybe Farm, right.
So this is a really interesting site. Because in the U.S. recently, I think the idea of the American farmer has become really sexy. So you see all these restaurants that are advertising farm to table,
right.
And people are drinking their chia seeds out of repurposed mason jars, and they call themselves farmers.
Right.
No offense. No offense to anybody who likes chia seeds or repurposing mason jars. There's nothing wrong with that. But let's be honest too, Mary, maybe you can give some perspective on this. Do you think that something like the Maybe Farm reflects this contemporary idea idea we have of like rural life in America and farms?
Oh, that is such a good question. I think it reflects it in the sense that people love to host weddings there. And it's a great place for mason jars and chia seeds and farm-to-table food. But I think really what we're more interested in doing is reflecting agricultural life from 200 or even 300 years ago, which I think is...
Right, because this is the oldest farm in the Mohawk Valley?
In the Mohawk Valley, yes, 1705.
Wow.
And I think it's almost impossible to truly imagine yourself on a farm in that time period, considering, again, it was the frontier pretty much. Everything west of there was wilderness and had all kinds of scary animals. And just something as simple as getting tea or butter would have been a multi-day excursion.
Right. So it's like the things we take for granted even as basic needs were luxuries for people who lived on the maybe farm that many hundreds of years ago.
I think just about everything was a luxury for them, yes.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. I'm kind of curious to know a little more about some of the other historic sites, not just the maybe farm, but also this historic house. Tell us a little bit about that too. Like, what does a vignette or a day in the life look like in a home like that?
The house was donated to us a couple years ago, and we were a little bit, I think, terrified of it because opening a new historic... Is it because
it's haunted?
Well, I think that it is, but that's
Okay.
just my opinion. Opening a historic house museum is not always, it's not the most popular idea. But we were lucky that we had some local artists who were interested in using the bedrooms and some of the other spaces in there to do their art. And I've been really pleased to see in the past year that we have 5 artists that are in there full time. One has even opened up a shop on the ground floor. So a day in the life of the oldest house in Schenectady is the story of 5 different artists creating and making work, you know?
Right. So this is something about heritage, both living in the past as well as today.
Right.
Which then brings us to my next question for you, Mary, which is, you know, I've heard of the term heritage tourism before.
Right.
And I'm curious to know, what kind of role do you see the SCHS playing in tourism today in the U.S., and particularly heritage tourism?
Heritage tourism is fantastic. I think it's great. I would love to see Schenectady do even more of that. And I hope that the Historical Society is playing a little bit of a role in attracting people, because we do have things not just like museums or historic houses, but we will do the farm to table dinners, and we do have, you know, the hands-on things that I think are really a big part of heritage tourism, because it's the stories and the cultures and sort of the activities of the past, but how do you make that fun and engaging in the present so that people want to come and visit?
What do you think people are looking for when they come to visit for things like this?
I think, and I say this as a heritage tourist myself, it's a really fun way to spend the day with loved ones, with family, with friends, to kind of just forget about everything that we have in modern life and focus on a place that has really interesting characteristics. The architecture, the food, the people, the stories, all of that. And I think Schenectady does have all of that, I really do.
Right, right. So you've told us a little bit about some of the things that the county, the society is doing presently or just in the recent past. I know you've done some paddling tours on, on the Mohawk River. What are some events and programs that you have coming up? Maybe give us a bit of a sampler of that.
Sure. So, I mean, this is always the season that I love to invite people into our spaces, because the fall and then the winter are just so filled with like seasonal foods and decorations and things like that. So throughout the month of October, we have candlelight tours, which is a little bit of history and a little bit of, you know, maybe being scared. And it's a lot of walking around the stockade in the evening, which is, I think, the best time to see it. All of the windows are lit up and people have their decor out. So that's
this
really
goes back to the hauntings you were referring to earlier,
yes,
right?
It does.
Have you seen any of these ghosts yourself?
I would say it's more of a feeling than a sight thing.
Okay, that's legit.
It's
That's a
legit.
feeling is a legit
I think so.
thing.
I think so. People should come and explore for themselves and see if they feel a little bit of the hauntings.
That's really cool. Now, do you also have a tour too that also deals with some of Schenectady's more scandalous histories?
We
Am I
do
right
that
about
too.
that?
Yes, we do that.
Tell us a bit about that.
I think there's no shortage of stories of, let's say, taverns and brothels and people getting into fights and people not acting perhaps as well as they could. And, you know, we like to tell those stories, maybe mix it up with a stop at a local pub, something like that.
Right. But that's history for you too, though, right? That people don't always do the most virtuous things.
No,
and it's just as much a part of history.
Absolutely. In fact, maybe it's a more kind of fun and interesting part of history.
Well, these programs and events sound really interesting and really intriguing as well. Maybe we'll all get a little bit spooked too along the way. Well, Mary, it was such a pleasure having you on A House for Arts. Thank you for coming in.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much.